Morning. Hello. It is Chris Sandeman back again. Saturday morning on the 24th of July, 2021. Just after 10 o'clock in the morning, and we are exploring good old Newport, Rhode Island. So that's where we are. And just saying good morning. I know it's a little bit early for our West Coasters right now. Sorry about that, guys. Don't expect you to watch this live necessarily, of course. And for Europe, hi. Hope you guys are enjoying lunch or post-lunch. And if you're watching this as a man, feel free to hit the like message or like button there if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment if you're on Facebook. Always great to read what you guys are saying and be able to say hello. And for those folks joining live, say hi. Always great to reach out, and hope that you are enjoying your Saturday wherever you are enjoying your Saturday right now. Unless, of course, it's already tomorrow for you, in which case I hope you're enjoying your Sunday wherever you are. So why don't I stop yabbering into the screen. Hi, Ross. Good to see you, man. Hope everything's going well over in Scotland. Hope you got sunshine today. And thanks for joining. Why don't we take a look a little bit at Newport and get touring. I don't know Newport. I did not know Newport that well before. And I have to be honest with you, it's a fascinating history for such a relatively small city, as well as such a small state. It's the smallest state in the United States, America, Rhode Island, that is. And hey, Dai, good to see you in Tokyo, if that's where you are right now, but I imagine you're in Japan. Hope the Olympics are kicking off well and you're getting some live streams out of that, buddy. So Newport history, starting in 1639 when it's founded, all the way through until the Revolutionary War. And in the Revolutionary War, it's occupied by the British. And during that occupation, it doesn't go well for Newport. And its industry, which was trade, it was a shipping port, Newport. It was a merchant's paradise. And war and the occupation by the British disrupts that. So going into the occupation, but by the time that the Brits finally leave, and the French actually arrive with Rochambeau, then housing their troops and wintering here in Newport, finally in 1781. 82 making their way, or 1781 making their way down, well, first over to meet up with Washington's troops and then to march down to Yorktown for the ultimate siege and then victory of Yorktown, which will fundamentally end the Revolutionary War. It takes another 2 years until terms are negotiated. Finally, the British leave. But that whole process, by the end of that, the population of Newport is only 5,000 people. So it's a 50% reduction. And a lot of the merchants simply packed up and left, moved their ships and their merchandise and went away. So Newport's history kind of comes in these like fits and starts where it grows for a while and then kind of retracts. And then eventually Newport will become a vacation paradise for the rich and others as well, and that's kind of the rejuvenation of Newport and the more modern Newport. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. Today we're going to be focusing on the time really from 1639 through till early 1800s, if you will, mid 1800s, early 1800s, and that starts us off here on Washington Square, main downtown area. With a lot of these great buildings that we're going to be exploring, starting with this building right here. Now today this building is the Museum of Newport History, which is a great place for us to start, and also, to be honest, if you're visiting Newport, it's a great place for you to come and start your journey to learn about this early colony. But this building was not here. Was not here at the founding in 1639. This building won't come around until the 1700s. And the construction of the building begins around 1762. It's not completed until 1772. It's actually meant to look a little bit, if you've done some London tours, you've been to London with us, or you are in London right now, it looks a bit like Somerset House, which Inigo Jones had designed. And it's that same sort of Georgian architectural style. So old Georgian buildings like this were not built in the United States of America. In fact, we changed the name and started calling them Federalist style buildings instead. This Georgian, though, style building built during the times when this was still a colonial holding of the crown. And it's built to be a market house. So if you're a merchant or a trader, you could come and keep your goods here while you were selling them or trading them. There would have been storage space to keep the goods protected, and then there would have been private sections inside the building. It's called the brick house, the old brick house. And why? Well, because brick was not a very common building material back in those days. Most of the buildings around were built out of wood, as we're going to see today again and again. But the fact that this was built out of brick, well, that gave it good reason to be called this kind of brick house, this market house. So why don't we continue to look around the square here? And if you think that at this end of Washington Square, what you have is commerce, right? And we look up through the square, and we're going to see at the other end, and we're going to be heading up towards, is the old Colony House. And that's where, noticeably absent from the square, however, are any church steeples. You can see one kind of poking around on the square proper. And this actually speaks very much to the history of Newport, which was a multi-denominational city. It was a place of religious freedom. It's actually part of the reason why the people of Newport will eventually make their way down here. Now, many of those early colonists will start in Massachusetts. And they'll make their way from England seeking religious freedom, and they'll end up in Boston or other parts of Massachusetts. And what they discover in Massachusetts is that this hard-fought religious freedom that they've left England for does not really exist in Massachusetts. The Puritans there had passed, ironically, their own set of rules and regulations limiting the freedom of religion that they themselves had sought to have, which they didn't have while in Great Britain. So the Puritans up there, not so tolerant of some of the early ideas of the people who will come to follow John Clark and Hutchinson. Now, these early religious objectors would come to be known as Baptists because of John Clark's own belief that you should kind of revitalize and reincorporate adult baptism. And well, he sees what's happening up in the Commonwealth, Massachusetts, and he decides that it's time for him, much like Anne Hutchinson, to leave. Now, Anne Hutchinson ends up going to New York colony. Well, actually, it was New Netherlands still at that point. Hey, Jenny Jean, thanks for the Purple Heart. Welcome to Newport, Rhode Island. So Anne Hutchinson ends up going to the Dutch-controlled New Netherlands, just north of New Amsterdam. She's unfortunately actually killed in an event, a series of events of where the Lenape people, the indigenous people around New York, or who were north of Manhattan, they end up reacting to a series of Dutch raids and massacres on their villages, and what is called Kieft's War. Kieft's War, Willem Kieft was a Dutch governor general in New Amsterdam before Peter Stuyvesant. And this meant that, well, yeah, he was replaced, he was recalled, partially because of this Keefe's War thing, which Anne Hutchinson will die during because of this Lenape or Wappinger Confederation group of Native Americans who actually were kind of just defending themselves, to be honest with you. Now, John Clark didn't go to New York. Instead, he goes to Portsmouth, which is a new town formed in what will one day become Rhode Island, on the northern end of the island that I'm standing on right now, Aquidneck Island. Now, John Clark will then be like, well, when you have so many religious offshoots coming down, it's only inevitable that like the people that are leaving one organization will then evolve and find new tenets and beliefs, and they'll kind of evolve into their next level of organization. So the people up in Portsmouth who are escaping from the Puritans up in Massachusetts end up saying, some of them say, you know what, we've got a slightly different belief here, and we're going to head down and start a new town called Newport. And that's how we end up getting down here in 1639 ultimately. Now, before I keep walking up towards the Colony House, I just wanted to show you guys really quick here in Washington Square. There's this awesome statue of this guy here, and his name is Oliver Hazard Perry. And you're just sort of like, someone named their kid, their middle name Hazard. How cool is that? Well, in my research, I've discovered that actually Hazard's probably a family name, because Mr. Perry here is related to the Hazard family, I guess. They were his ancestors. Now, Hazard actually is probably pronounced Hazard. But Perry, this guy here, our good old friend Oliver, Hazard Perry, was a hero of the War of 1812. He was a naval captain, and up on Lake Erie, he engages the British. He actually forces, the first time ever, that an entire, an entire, group of British ships will all surrender at the same time in 1813. Now, there were two ships, the Lawrence and the Niagara, which were U.S. ships that Perry had been building and arming and manning. Hey, Michaela. Oh, from The Hague. Hey, hoe gaat het? Hoe gaat het met jou? Alles goed? Alles goed in The Hague? Ja, belachelijk. Erg goed. That's my Dutch, guys. How about that? So, back to good old friend Perry here. Long story short, he's, Ross asked really quick, is Newport the capital of Rhode Island? It was, Ross. Newport was the capital of Rhode Island until, well, like 1900. In fact, they were still making the old Colony House the center for Newport, for Rhode Island legislators to come together. But no, today Newport is not the capital. It is, in fact, the capital is in Providence. For a while, the Rhode Islanders had a policy of having the Capitol House actually be a rotating place in different parts of Rhode Island. So the legislators would meet in different locations, and that rotation kind of ends, and eventually they build their own Capitol building, permanent, like great Capitol building in Providence, and that's where that is. Perry, however, this guy behind me, like I was saying before, he ends up dying at only the age of 32, after a pretty short time in the world, but he's always will be known for this battle in 1813, where after his battleship, the Lawrence, is badly damaged, he jumps on the Niagara instead. He relieves the guy Elliot of command there, and he takes the Niagara, and he sails directly into the British line of ships. Now, the Americans had 9 ships, the Brits only had 5 ships, but the British ships were fully decked and ready to go. And still, Perry's somehow able to kill all of the commanding officers on the other British ships. They surrender, first time like that had happened, and Perry goes on to be this national war hero. He receives the Congressional Medal of Honor, the Gold Congressional Medal of Honor, one of the highest rewards you can get. This guy right here. So anyway, that's in the middle of the square. Let's keep on going up towards the Colony House. As we do, Michaela writes, everything's fine except you don't speak Dutch. Michaela, there's always time to learn. And your English, Dutch always felt like kind of just a little bit between those two to me. You'd be able to pick up Dutch if you speak English and German. Just worth pointing out really quick, we were just talking about our buddy Oliver Hazard Perry. This was his old house right here. He used to live in that puppy. The Bulliard Perry house. And it's actually pretty rare that, not rare, but there's a lot of old buildings throughout this city which have sort of shifted location. But this is one of the originals, and still where it is today, it's as well, which is pretty neat. Now, actually, I said before there were no churches on this square, and this old building here is actually an old church, but this red brick building here with the dark top, which says the Jane Pickens Theater and Event Center. Well, it becomes the Jane Pickens Theater and Event Center, but originally in 1834, when it's built, it is the Zion Episcopal Church. And you can hear that already, 1834. That's a lot later than most of this square was being built, and that's because, of course, churches were not being built on the main square. You had government, municipality on one end, and then you had commerce, the brick house on the other end. This later building that will come will eventually then become a Catholic church, St. Joseph's, in 1885, and by 1918 it is converted away from God and towards theater instead. It comes in 1918 the Lafayette Theater. In the 70s they rename it the Jane Pickens Theater and Event Center after a famous performer here. So, this building that we have here is the Florence K. Murray Judicial Complex. It is today's courthouse, Judicial Center. Now, on the front door it says Anno Domini 1926, but actually this building's not consecrated and opened until 1927. It's named after a famous lady, Florence K. Murray, who will actually end up being many firsts. She is the first female state senator in Rhode Island in 1949. She was the first female judge in Rhode Island in 1956, and she was the first female member of the Rhode Island Supreme Court in 1978. This building, it replaces the Colony House as being the old kind of center of justice. And it actually also replaces a building that used to be here, the Decatur House, which we're going to actually walk by in a little bit and be able to take a look at. So we'll see that when we get there. But over here, kind of the creme de la creme, the cream of the crop, we've got another great Georgian style building here, which we've got to take a look at because it is the Colony House. And to be honest, it has not changed much since its original building. It's probably the best maintained Georgian public building in the entire United States, built in the colonial era. And it was one of the first ever buildings to be designated a National Historic Landmark by Eisenhower in 1960. Kristen writes right now, didn't know you were in the US. Are you doing regular tours in Newport? We've done your wonderful tours in Prague, Berlin, Dublin, Amsterdam, Edinburgh, and Madrid. Hey, thank you, Kristen. That's great to hear. Love the fact that you've gone on so many of our tours. And we're not in Newport. We're just visiting. I'm just visiting Newport right now as part of our live streaming that, look, until everyone can travel again and people can travel to the cities that we're working in and cities that you want to walk in, we're live streaming different locations as well. Stops and starts. But we're we're getting closer to having just regular live streaming happening in all of the cities that we operate in, like Prague, Berlin, Dublin, Amsterdam, Edinburgh, Madrid, but also new places that we are able to explore and go check out. So welcome to Newport. Happy that you're with us right now. Come say hi. You can always stream bomb. You know where I am right now because it's a live tour. So here I am on Washington Square. Keep on going. All right, Colony House, boom, Georgian architecture, you're back again. So this building has served a lot of functions. And in the very early days, it sort of like creates the center of, the center of town. And it's also been the center of a lot of the history and events that are kind of taking place around the city. Probably the most important of those from a revolutionary kind of earlier colonial standard days would have been leading up to the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act was one of those, and I don't want to get down into the depths of the American Revolution and kind of its basic causes, but fundamentally, the basic idea going into the American Revolution is that American colonists, Englishmen, right, are guaranteed in 1697 by the English Bill of Rights the right that no Englishman shall be taxed without their consent, either directly or through representation. Okay, like that's the fundamental argument that a lot of this stuff is based on, that and money, right? So you had two types of British colonists. You had the really wealthy ones and you had the not so wealthy ones. And the really wealthy ones were largely involved down in like Barbados, the Caribbean, and they were sugar barons, white gold, okay? And the northern colonies, if you will, like the 13 colonies as we think of the United States, but they were just like the northern British colonies, they were predominantly, you had your religious outcasts, like the Puritans that end up up in Massachusetts. You end up with your Baptists and your Quakers, through Rhode Island, down into Pennsylvania and Connecticut. But all in all, they were growing food for the most part, and beaver pelts and beer and rum, molasses, trading, merchants, slaves. But a lot of it was food production to feed the colonies in the South, which were using all the land that they had for sugarcane. Those wealthy British merchants will end up returning from the southern colonies, empowered, moneyed, and they'll get themselves seats in Parliament. They'll become landed lords. And then they'll slowly start to change the laws in Great Britain to make it less advantageous for those merchants here in the colony and milking more and more profit ultimately. They start to pass laws saying that you can't trade with the Dutch or the French. You have to buy all your goods from the British instead. And they start to enforce taxes which had been sort of more skimpily enforced. All part of a series of tamping down, but also creating direct taxation. The American judicial mind starts to say, well, hold on a second, part of our rules are that we cannot be taxed unless we have representation. And right now, as a colony, we have no representation in Parliament. Those lords from Barbados, they went back and took property in Sussex and Essex and Kent. They're living high on the hog now, right? And serving in the House of Lords. No longer representatives from the colony that they own lots of property in, but from England itself. And the patriot British, English, Americans say, well, hold on a second, what about us in this taxation question? This is basically the theme of it. No taxation without representation. Either give us the right to be represented or stop taxing us. Everyone had their own issues, of course, but this comes down to a lot of it. Thank you, Kristen, for your kind words about our trips. And Ross, Rhode Island, Newport is roughly halfway between Boston and New York City. Yeah, I think we're a little bit closer to Boston where we are now for sure, because we're all the way to the east, of that stretch of land before you kind of have to go up and north towards Massachusetts. So we're closer to Boston than we are to New York. This is definitely Red Sox and Patriots territory, if you talk to sports teams. The Yankees territory ended way back towards New Haven, so we're well into Boston territory, if you will. All right, so 1765. This is what goes on right over here. There's the Stamp Act, and the Stamp Act is another form of direct taxation, where basically the Brits are saying, anytime you have a newspaper or a legal document or something like that, you are going to have to get a stamp on it to prove that it's legit, it's official. You got to go get it stamped, like a notary public, if you will. And people do not like that at all. By the way, on these steps, this is where the Declaration of Independence will be read in 1776, which is pretty cool. So Colony House, a bunch of people show up, and they're invited here by some anti-Stamp Act people who have offered free beer and free cheese if you show up. So the crowd shows up, and the crowd starts to get pretty riled up on these steps, looking out into their, Washington Square, as it wasn't called then, because of course it's named after George Washington, who was not yet the big man in 1765 that he would become. And the riled up, angry protesters demanding the repeal of the Stamp Act, which, by the way, would happen. It would be repealed within a year or so. The colonies. It was actually pretty unpopular in England as well, because the colonies responded with a financial boycott of buying British goods. So then the British merchants were like, get rid of the Stamp Act, this thing sucks. Anyway, politics and history. These angry guys here, who are dancing around, drinking beer and eating cheese, decide to head up the street over here, where it turns out a local lawyer, magistrate, and stamp tax collector lived. Yeah, within spitting distance. After a couple of pints, they head up to his house. And his name was none other than Martin Howard. And Martin Howard, living in this house, actually lives in the house which is the oldest, or lived in the house that, don't listen to you music, I don't hear you. Okay, we're through, we're past. Lived in the house that actually is here, the oldest surviving house, not just in Newport, but it's the oldest surviving house in the entire state of Rhode Island. Now, not all of this building is the oldest house. There's been, reconstruction and changes that were done here, but Martin Howard Jr., this lawyer and loyalist, if you will, also called Tories, not like Boris Johnson's political party, but Tories were loyalists who supported the crown during the Revolutionary War, as we've come to call them. He fled his house. He left in 1766 after the Stamp Act riots because he was pretty terrified. Not only had all of these protesters shown up drunk and bashed their way into his home, they'd been carrying around effigies of him and two of his fellow Stamp Act tax collectors. And those effigies that looked a lot like them were in nooses and being hung. So he said, it's time to go. And he left wisely. The house then passed into the hands of the Wanton family instead, which made a ton of sense because they kind of bought it at auction and got a great deal because Howard had left. In 1782, John Wanton then bequeathed the house to Daniel Lyman, who was a Revolutionary major, and that's when they added the rear wing, expanding this house. And from that gentleman, Daniel Lyman, eventually the house will pass on to Benjamin Hazard, an ancestor of our good buddy Benjamin Hazard, our ancestor of Oliver Hazard Perry, who we met before, and that happens in 1807. From 1807 till 1911, this house stays in the same family. in the Hazard family, and only sells when finally the oldest living daughter passes away. She was 101 years old, so it stayed in the family for a good long time. Well, let's zoom back around, and I want to show you another old home over here. Let me see if I can get across the street. Thank you very much, gentlemen, letting me across. Because this whole street here, which is pretty cool, these homes are all built in the 17 and 1800s. And they were originally residential houses, but they become commercial houses, because we are now on Old Broadway. And the oldest of these old homes on Old Broadway is this one, 2 to 6 Broadway. You can actually get a feeling of it, how the residential style changed to being more of a commercial district. And you have all these like small offices and small doors. There's number 2, that's number 4, and there you go, number 6, and then there's number 8. It's tiny, tiny little places. So originally this was the home of Peleg Sanford, who was the governor of the colony of Rhode Island from 1680 to 1683, and he built this late 1600s, early 1700s. I mean, it could have been earlier, but we don't have a great record of it. So by 1827, this building had changed and then had that storefront that's down below, and was enlarged again in 1845 with this mix of Greek Revival and Colonial kind of elements that you can get a better sense of as we walk around the side. I've read that many Newporters recognize and know this house as Lolly's, which was a variety store and tobacconist that operated in this space all the way through until 1986. So this building that we're just going to circle around really quick as I go is it's actually kind of neat. I just noticed a small little factor here that you can see the red right returning and the green for port and starboard on these lamps here. And the reason why this is pretty neat is that this Beaux-Arts style architectural building here, one of the only Beaux-Arts buildings I've really seen here in Newport. It's a style that was more common in New York for sure in the same period of time. This was the YMCA for, especially in the 1940s and 50s, you had lots of naval seamen who were staying here. Young Men's Christian Association building. You see, you get a better view of it on this side. Really pretty building. I'll zoom out real quick. As a pool, a dining hall, mess hall, barrack space, beds, rooms, fitness areas and stuff used for those folks. Today, this is actually low-income housing here in downtown Newport. So not a shabby location to be as a low-income housing resident. Pretty beautiful building and space. I still have the Colony House over here. I kind of want to show you guys. All right, let's go over here first. Sorry that I'm a little bit discombobulated. Usually when you end up doing a tour, and you've done a tour like 1,000 times, you just have your set plan and path, and you kind of go through. Whereas now, I'm still trying to bring together all the different elements of Newport and figure out like what plays to the story the best way for us. So as always, don't hesitate to reach out, say hi, ask questions. I don't know the answers, but it doesn't mean I won't try as we explore this super old location. Next stop we have in front of us is an old tavern. Let's take a look at this one. Dun, dun, dun. Because it's not any old tavern. It is quite likely the oldest tavern in all of the United States. And here it is, the White Horse Tavern. Ross asks, is Rhode Island classified as New England? Very much so. Yeah, it's a key aspect of New England, for sure. New England is Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and Rhode Island, and of course the great state of Connecticut. So, Jenny Jean, thanks for the Purple Heart. So the White Horse Tavern here in 1673, America's oldest tavern. Now, to be fair, this building is largely expanded in size. And not just that, it was not continuously used as a tavern. But the oldest part of the building, which was used as a tavern, was used as a tavern from all the way back then in the 1600s. And again, not continuously so, but for a long time, you know. This has been here, and you get a real feeling of the parts of the building have been added to. Yeah, they've built onto it as they've gone. But it's a great salt box style New England construction, where you can see that this end of the building is taller, higher, and this part slopes down. Named that way because of the fact that this is what old salt boxes actually used to look like. Adriana San Pedro, thanks for the cactus, my friend. Thank you for the cactus. Now, while we're over here, it's actually going to give us a great view of another incredibly old building here across the street. And looking down the street, we can see as well, just worth pointing out really quick, there is that old center of government, the old Colony House, right? Which would have been center of government in the colony before, and then also after the Revolutionary War. That's where that Stamp Act riot takes place. And you can see it's just down the street from where we are here at the White Horse Tavern. So it was a common thing that legislators from over there would end up coming over here to have their drinks and continue the informal politics of the day, and continue their discussions. In fact, at times it was used as a meeting house itself. Not a religious meeting house, but a political meeting house. But to pan back over here, what we have, wonderfully, is the Great Friends Meeting House. Now, the Great Friends Meeting House was the center of the Quaker religion for a long time. And actually, when this building is actually first constructed, it was the largest building between Boston and New York City. And that's in 1699, all right, just at the turn of the century. This will be the largest building anywhere. Now, back then, it wasn't this entire building. Oh, Adriana, thank you for the change in emoji. Oh, I get a heart. I love it. Thank you very much. Gracias. So the original building actually is right where this stage is here, right? This was the original center in here. What you have over to the left was the section, the women's section of the building, and what you have over here to the right is the section which is extended and built up to handle the Great Friends annual meeting, where you end up having Quakers from all over New England come and join together. As many as 3,000 people, 3,000 Quakers would come into the city. And a city, remember, with a population of only around 10,000 people. So it was a significant increase of the number of folks. And the Quakers were amongst those religious groups who were not doing well in England or in Boston, right? And in fact, Quakers were put on trial in Boston. One of them was actually hanged, executed for repeatedly preaching as the Quaker belief system up in Boston, was banished, first of all, exiled, returned, continued to preach, and then was executed. So those guys up in Boston took it really, really seriously, their religious non-freedom. You understand why a lot of Quakers were like, we're going to go someplace else. And what was the fundamental big difference for the Quakers? They believed that the grace of God came not through work, not through effort, very much more Calvinist perspective, that you work your way to heaven, but instead they believed that the light of God shone through all of us, and that it was actually this internal light, this internal grace, this piety that would push you to heaven and such. That wasn't the only thing that Quakers believed. They were also pretty, as you can see, if this was their meeting house, this was their church house, it's pretty subdued. This does not look like a big Catholic church to me or something like that. And that was also part of the Quaker thing, was to dress down. There's an acronym that the Quakers would use. It's SPICE. SPICES, or spices, sorry. And that stands for simplicity, peace, integrity, community, equality, and stewardship. And that's really kind of the core principles of the Quakers. Why were they called Quakers? Some people said it's because of the way they would pray, and they would gather together with no formal kind of priest as their leader, but Quakers would come together in a room until one of them would kind of be moved to speak, and they would stand in community and listen to that one person speaking. And it could be a woman or a man. That was something a lot of the religions back in the 1600s weren't so comfortable with, that women also had this light of God shining through them, so they should be equals with other men. It meant that the Quaker religion was very popular amongst women, including many of the first residents of Newport. Makes sense, right? But actually, the idea that when Quakers would stand and pray, that they would shake a bit, and that gave them their name, the Quakers. Actually, it's not accurate. That's an apocryphal story. The real fact of it is that the founder of the Quakers, a gentleman by the name of Fox, when he was in England, would say that people should tremble at the word of the Lord. They should tremble at the word of the Lord. And as a way to kind of make fun of him or poke fun at him, he was referred to as a Quaker, quaking, shaking in fear of the Lord. And the Quakers liked it. They let it stick, and that became part of their name. So Quakers are also known generally as being pacifists. They, despite being pacifists, did believe in slave holding. 70% of Quakers in the 1700s would own slaves, which is a lot, it feels like. But their one obligation was to make sure that their slaves would also have to partake in their religious education and whatnot, and then it was okay. Eventually, that goes out the window, and it's handed down through the church that no, we'll no longer do that. And then Quakers became pretty fervent abolitionists. So the building itself here being the big draw for folks for a while. In 1905, I believe, the grand meeting that this room and area was used for, of where Quakers all kind of come together, that's ended. And it moves to somewhere else in New England, and instead this building kind of falls into disrepair, and like much of the buildings or many of the buildings in Newport is saved in the 60s and 70s and revitalized and restored. So today privately owned, but lots of public community meetings that take place there. All right. Well, let's look at the White Horse Tavern over here. And we're going to walk around. I think we're going to walk around over here.
She ignored me.
Just want to show you guys the old jail. Ooh, it's starting to heat up. It started in the kind of mid-70s, and now it's creeping up as the sun is starting to rise, and we're hitting 10:49. Hiya, morning. And over here we've got so the jailhouse that we're about to walk by is now an inn, like a hotel. It was built originally in 1772 by Lawton and Ring, George Lawton and Oliver Ring. In those days, jails had a kind of a different function. Whereas today, when someone goes to jail, they might be there for a long time in prison. Whereas back here in the 1700s, if you committed an offense against the colony or the city or one another, you were more likely to end up not in with a permanent loss of your liberty and in confinement. You would instead be held in the jail, which we see in front of us, for a period of time. This was also the police station up until 1927, by the way. And you'd be held in the jail, and then you'd be sentenced to, for your crime. And your sentencing would usually involve, at the very, 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 very strictest level, of course, maybe there was an execution, but more likely than not, you were simply exiled if you were a bad boy. Now, if you weren't that bad a boy, then you might just be sent to the stocks or the pillory in the town center, where, like that old kind of medieval idea, like you put your hand and your head in and people throw poop and old veggies at you, and all that. You do your time and then you'd be a bunch of times, like too many times. Then maybe if you're a repeat offender, you'd end up getting like a tattoo on a brand, much less fun than a tattoo, much more painful. You'd be branded with a letter that would also signify your crime against the community. And then people would really know that you were a bad boy. And hopefully this would all be trying to get you to stop, right, and reform eventually. The interesting story about the jailhouse here is that once there was a fantastical escape. And it was during the winter of 1859 to 1860. There was a stonemason who was incarcerated inside of the old jail, and he figured that the bricks around his prison window, the mortar between the bricks, was loose and failing. So with a little bit of work, he's able to chip away and wiggle those bricks out until he's able to actually displace the bars on his window and escape. Unfortunately, this mason, while great at escaping from jails, was not so good at covering his tracks. And a recent snowfall led his followers to see that he was indeed in the corner at the Ocean House Hotel. They tracked him there, and they got him. Now, sorry, I before said this was used until only 1927 as the police station. I'm wrong. 1986. Until 1986, this was used as the police station, when finally a new police facility and detention area was constructed on Broadway to replace this jailhouse, and it was turned into an inn instead. Over here, the Decatur House. This is that house that used to be over where the Judicial Building today stands. So, yeah, built before 1714, home of Captain Stephen Decatur, father of Commodore Decatur, hero of the War of 1812. Although, as we know, Perry was the real hero of the War of 1812. Although Decatur, of course, played its part. And this is a good example of a building that has been moved. It used to be in a different location. It's been shifted. Now it's a Mexican restaurant, I think. Perro Saldo, Mexican. Delicious. All right. Well, we're pushing up on 50 minutes right now, and there's still another building that we're going to cut across Washington Square again, and we're going to head up oldest synagogue in the United States of America, a building that itself has been here for a very long time. We're also going to be able to take a quick look at the home to John, the First Baptist Church, which was the second Baptist church to be built in Rhode Island after the one in Providence. Whenever I think of Baptists, I have to be honest, I usually think of African American black people and choirs and singing and all that beautiful light of God and all that stuff. I don't really think of old British guys with black clothing and pointed white faces. But yeah, no, they were the original Baptists, believe it or not. Although today, 49% of all Baptists are in Africa. I read that recently. So, but we can see in the distance, you see we're drawn back to this central square of Washington Square. Not laid out in a square at all, more of a elongated triangle. But it lets us see, why don't we just walk up this way? Past the Colony House one more time. Fourth oldest municipal building in the country. Beautiful still. And there we are. That white building is what we're looking for. The First Baptist Church, or the United Baptist Church. Zoom in. Give ourselves a little bit of a better view. Great. Yeah, this is it. So when Dr. John Clark leaves Massachusetts after the Puritans exile Anne Hutchinson from Massachusetts, like we were talking about before, she goes to New York, like we were saying, and unfortunately dies at the hands of a vengeful Lenape raiding party. Clark, however, comes to Portsmouth, on the north end of Aquatineck Island, where we're standing, then eventually comes here, and this was his. This is the site of the church that he, wouldn't live to see himself, because it's not built until 1836 in this Greek Revival style. But the religion itself, or the congregation here, founded in 1644. Same descendant people there of that early founding. Over here we've got the Loeb Visitor Center. The Loebs are great at preservation of Jewish history and general philanthropy. And they also fund and support free visits to the synagogue around the corner that we're going to be walking over to and talking about as we kind of wrap up, which is the Toro Synagogue. How am I going to cross? I'm going to go this way. Bear with me. And do I have the light? I will. Yes. Perfect. All right. So we can start to see the Toro Synagogue coming up. Also known as the Congregation Jesuit Israel. By the way, Shabbat Shalom to any religious people who are watching today. Now, I am a goy myself, and therefore I'm not breaking Shabbat by working today. So I am your Shabbos goy. And I've taken you here. Great. to the synagogue. So, built in 1763, it is the oldest synagogue building still standing in the United States. And it's the only one that dates back to the colonial period. Newport, like we were saying before, was from its very origins a religiously tolerant city. They realized it was good for business to be tolerant to religions. See the security guard outside? I've had security here now for a little bit of time. Let me see if I can. I don't want to interrupt the Shabbat services, but I do want to keep on showing you guys the building. Maybe I won't go on the property itself, and we'll just talk about it from over here instead. Ross asks, is Newport an expensive, exclusive place to live? Yeah, it is, Ross. Newport's quite expensive. You're going to pay $700,000 for a 3-4 bedroom house here. Not in the nicest part of town, I guess. And many mansions worth millions and millions. So, the synagogue was designed by Peter Harrison, who's actually a very noted British architect and Rhode Island resident from the 1700s. I was talking about the religious openness. So you would have had a colony of Sephardic Jews, most likely displaced during the Spanish Inquisition in the 1500s, who ended up moving towards the Caribbean. And they, by way of the Caribbean, will relocate, shalom, and make their way to Newport because of there's a lot of opportunity here, a lot of trading, and wealth to be realized during the time, but also the ability to practice your religion freely, and for you not to have to contend with, for instance, in Massachusetts, where you'd had Jews trying to become part of the colony, but blocked out and unallowed to actually join and become voting members. And I don't want to hear this fucking music here. Sorry, there we go. This guy blasting his music as he drives by, both being loud to me as well as being loud to the synagogue. Not so culturally sensitive. I slid out of the way because they were also trying to get on my live stream. Not the way to stream bomb, guys. Not the way to stream bomb. So, like we were saying, people end up moving to Newport, of course, take advantage of the trade that's going on here inside the space. And one of those guys is Aaron Lopez, who was by the name Aaron Lopez. Get a feeling that there's some Sephardic background there, and he was a major philanthropist and merchant in Newport, who was involved in making sperm whale candles, as well as, unfortunately, heavily involved in the slave trade. But those Sephardic Jews who end up coming to Newport bring this knowledge, right, of how to take whale sperm and like whale blubber and turn it into whale oil, whale candles, and that is not just an incredibly profitable industry to be in, but it's one that Newport will learn from these people who and they benefit greatly from it. So the Newporters were understanding that if you're open to religion, then you had a lot more opportunity in the types of different skill sets that the different groups of people looking to practice their religion freely would also bring and incorporate into your community and the rest. So, anywho, we're just coming up on an hour now. That's my goal, to try to last for us for about an hour. So we've done it. Cool other building across the street here, really quick, just worth pointing out. And you can see some of the also Beaux-Arts style Corinthian columns on the outside here. This is actually a building that has been shifted. And you can see in the kind of the middle of the building places where it's been taken apart, and you can see this, like these lines in here of where the building has actually been pulled apart and then reconnected together as they shift. There's so much history in Newport, and there's so many more things to see. So many amazing stories of the people that have lived here. Just up the street is Ezra Stiles' house.
Well, behind you, so I don't distort your picture.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine. It's easy. Thanks. You're very welcome to
The
it.
history of this building, if you're interested.
Please.
See that big red brick building there with the tower?
Yeah.
That's a courthouse. Newport had 5 capitals. Rhode Island had 5 capital cities. That's a governor's mansion that stood on that property.
Ah, and they shifted it.
In the 20s, the state decided they needed a courthouse in Newport. Where else to do it? Get rid of the governor's mansion. They didn't need it anymore because they had consolidated the capital into Providence. The Jewish community bought the building, cut it in half, pulled it up the hill, put it back together, and that's a community center building for the congregation.
Ah,
That building itself is about 200 years old.
I didn't know half of that story. Thank you very much.
A little sidelight, and sometime in the 50s, they found a leak in the roof. They called a roofer in. They forgot to splice the roof.
No. So the water damage could still go in, or?
Well, no, they fixed it, of course.
Okay, yeah.
But it needs major renovations, but it still is a support building for the synagogue.
Thank you for taking the time to share that with me.
Where are you visiting from?
From New York City.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that building on the corner is from 1704. It's the original building. When they get enough money, they're going to renovate it back to and make it useful again. Right now it's empty. But it outdates the synagogue.
Right. And the synagogue's from
1763.
1763. Amazing.
It's just the way it was built. With a few minor exceptions, everything is the same way it was. The color scheme in the synagogue dates back to sometime in the 1790s. They don't know why it was painted or when it was painted, but they know construction was started and stopped 4 different times, so they feel the woods didn't match. So sometime in the 1790s they painted it. That's the original color scheme. They went through roughly 25 layers of paint to get to that color scheme.
Wow. There were that many layers of paint that were on top of it still that they had to take the paint off. Amazing.
They scraped down roughly 25 layers.
Incredible.
Much of the glass is the original glass.
Wow, amazing.
The window frames are new, and about 10 years ago they went through a major renovation, and they took the windows out, and they found the windows are held together by the paint.
No.
And they found a factory somewhere that could reproduce the window frames. So the window frames are new, but the glass, much of the glass is the original glass.
Amazing.
It has a terrific history.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate you sharing some of it with me, and I've tried to share some of it with my group as well today. So
Well,
I
anyhow,
appreciate
welcome to Newport. Have a good time and be safe.
Thank you very much. Shabbat Shalom. I appreciate it. Oh. How about that, guys? How nice was that guy? What a super nice Newporter. Just an old Jewish Newport guy. Awesome. What a great town. Why don't we walk down this last street here, which has got a bunch of old buildings on it, and we'll say goodbye for right now. As we go past the Gideon Cornell house. So like I was saying, Ezra Stiles used to live in this town, which is really cool as well. Ezra Stiles was the president of Yale College and the namesake for the dorm that I lived in when I went to college, when I was at Yale. And turns out that he was just like a Newport genius and busybody, and he spent tons of his time just writing in his diary about what was going on in Newport and what his neighbors were doing and what he thought they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. And because of his diaries and his journals, we have so much knowledge about what was going on in Newport, simply because of, one gossip. I love that. it's such a cool thing, that you get in smaller communities of people taking time to care and pay attention to what other people are doing. I don't know, it really tickles me. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to be showing you guys a little bit of this. Well, listen, I'm going to be back again tomorrow. If we're looking at here some of the oldest buildings in the city of Newport. I mean, here's a young one at 1876, the Centennial House, referring to, of course, the American Centennial. This house here from sometime before 1854. If we're looking at buildings here from the kind of the 16, 17, and 1800s, we're going to tomorrow be walking along the cliff walk and seeing many of the old mansions. This house here from 1760, House of Nassau Hasty, a barber and a peruca maker. Peruca was like a wig maker. And back in those days, in the 1700s, pretty much for any formal function, men who were of means would have worn a wig. So, how about that? Why don't we keep on walking a little bit along here? Because this actually is an old black church here. And guys, this church here that we're looking at right now, which is in a little bit of, a little worse for wear shape, needs a fresh paint, a fresh coat of paint. This was the first free black church anywhere in the United States. This is the first Freeman's Church, the Union Congregational Church, built in 1834. First free black church in the United States, which is pretty neat as well. Did you know that, hey Bar, Shalom, we just left we just walked by the oldest synagogue in the US that's still standing, the second oldest Jewish congregation. And an awesome Jewish guy came out and started telling me some history on his Shabbat. Very cool. So I'm glad that you were able to catch maybe part of that, or you can go back and check it out because we've just seen that. Some other firsts we've been talking about here in Newport. I mean, the second Jewish congregation, but the first time that oh, cool, thanks, Bar. Yeah, it's the second. So the second Jewish congregation. It's the first place that our judge lady was serving on the local courts. First free black church. Newport is the first state in the United States to grant black people the right to vote. In the 1840s, I think 1846. Although you still had to pay $137 to prove that it was some ridiculous sum of money that would still kind of hold you, not necessarily having totally free suffrage, but still, it was a step in the right direction. Newport soldiers during the Revolutionary War had a black regiment able to fight along with other soldiers. I don't know, it was pretty progressive. It's a pretty progressive place, which is neat and well worth a visit. But all right, I wax poetic. We've already gone over our hour. Bar, glad that I got to see you at the end. Jenny, thanks for joining us today. Ross, thanks for swinging in. Absolutely awesome to see you, buddy. Thanks for all the questions. Kristen, thank you. Really appreciate the kind words. And glad to hear that you think the tours are great for kids. That's awesome. Guides are storytellers, trying to keep it connected for everyone. Michaela, I hope you're doing well, and thanks for chipping in, even though I know you're on vacation right now in The Hague. Good to see you. Di, thanks for saying hi earlier on today. And really, really happy to have been able to show you guys some stuff. Thanks, Ross. appreciate it. I hope you got a feeling a little bit of this beautiful town. And tomorrow I'll be back same time, starting at 10 a.m. But we're going to be over at the Cliff Walk, looking at some of the old mansions, the Vanderbilts mansions, or the old famous, wealthy, J.P. Morgan mansion kind of heads of industry from the old days in the 1800s into the 1900s. See some of those beautiful spaces. But besides that, have a wonderful day, guys. Enjoy wherever you are, and goodbye to good old Newport. Maybe not the best last place, but you're looking around, all these buildings were built in the 1800s, 1700s, so they're looking pretty good for themselves. And from the corner of Church Street and Division Street, I shall say my adieu, my farewell. I see a graveyard. I can't help but walk over towards it. And see you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye.